Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. My name is Marco Simonelli and I'm working for the Friends of the Global Fund Europe based in Italy. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce this session, the title Global Health and COVID-19, the role of the G20 and of multilateral organization. And I'm very, very pleased to have been invited by you to moderate this session, because I think it's very important now to show, and you will see the participants that they will go to show the link between the actual pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the preparedness that we had or we hadn't for this epidemic worldwide. And we are going to talk about the role that the G20 and the countries that are part of the G20 can have in fighting this pandemic, but also to be more proactive for in case or in epidemic preparedness and supporting the role of multilateral system, and especially the Global Fund, which is one of the biggest multilateral investors in health systems, and has, as you will see, some of the speakers will talk about this, has prepared already some response mechanisms to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to start quickly from the first speakers, because we have only 1 hour and we have at least 6 speakers. I think the first one will be Masaki Inaba. Masaki is a policy advisor for the Japan Civil Society Network. He also served as program director on Global Health in Africa Japan Forum, which is a Japanese NGO working on African issues. He served previously as helping the Sherpa of the C20, which is in occasion of the Osama Summit in 2019, and coordinated civil society advocacy work for TICAD in Yokohama in 2019. He's also part of the steering committee, is a member of the steering of the GFAN, Global Fund Advocate Network for Asia and Pacific, and worked previously in several organizations. Out of them, just to mention one, the Association for Gay and Lesbian Movement and the Trade Union of Day Workers in Japan. Masaki will talk to us about the reason why G20 and C20 is important for the Global Fund advocacy. Masaki, you can start. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much. My name is Masaki Inaba. I was the former C20 Sherpa last year because Japan hosted the G20, and so that the Japanese civil society hosted the C20 as an engagement group, and held the C20 Summit in April, and also various kind of the advocacy campaign and for the G20 last year. I would like to share my presentation. And how can I share? And it is and for the host. And can you allow me to share the presentation?
Masaki, I'll just share it. Just give me 2 seconds. You can start, and I'll pop it up on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, firstly, as Marco said, that the G20 is very important. G20 is very important platform for the global health. And so, thank you very much for sharing my slide. So, please go to the next slide. Okay, thank you very much. So, yes, so that the G20 is the platform of global economic policy consisted of 20 large economies, both developed and developing. So that the G20 countries, including the traditional donors and also emerging donors, and the high income countries and the upper middle income countries, and also the lower middle income countries. And the common points of G20 countries are that they are all the big economies. And probably you can see how they are important and to realize the financing of the G20. We see it, and so that the traditional donor, and there are the how to say the share of the traditional donors for the global fund. For example, 6 replenishment, the share is 80.63%. And also on G20 total, it is 81.45%. So that how to say the G20 country, without G20 countries, and there are no global fund. It is very important reality. And also the percentage is low, but emerging donors are still financing the global fund, and like South Korea and 25 million, and also Saudi Arabia 30 million, and also South Africa 10 million or something. So these 20 countries are key to realize the fully funded global fund. So next slide, please. Thank you. And also from the 2017 Germany G20 Summit, the global health has been the major agenda of G20. It is also very important. So that the G20 is one of the global arena where the global health policies are developed. So on especially health system strengthening and also universal health coverage became a major global health policy through the process of G20. And using the rhetoric and also policy of UHC, we realized the increase of the, for example, Japanese funding for the global fund. So we can use universal health coverage as a leverage of the the replenishment for the global fund. And on Argentina 2018, child obesity issues and AMR issues were also key agenda. And also in Japan, aging and health, and also health security, including the AMR, was the major agenda of global health. And this year, probably this year, Rachel will provide more detailed information on the health, their health discussion. But the COVID-19 dominates the health agenda. And the 2021 and the 2022, the Italy will lead the 22 and the next year. And India will lead in 2022, and the 7th replenishment of the global fund will be in 2022. So that India G20 will be very important. And also how we, the civil society, have been doing the advocacy work is mainly through the engagement group involvement. There are 8 engagement groups, including C20, but we have other engagement groups like a B20, Y20, W20, T20, S20, L20. They are business, youth, women, and think tank, and science, and also labor. And also there are some unofficial but important engagement group like AIDS20, it is Health 20. And also Foundation 20, it is the coalition of the foundations working on the climate change. So with these kind of engagement groups, we can more effectively advocate for the G20 process. So next slide, it is the last slide. Yeah. So the currently, the most important thing is that the COVID-19. So, keeping G20 commitment on AIDS, TB, malaria for 2022 in the new environment of the global health under COVID-19, it is the question. And also, it is the most important point for the advocacy through G20. So, G20 can play an important role to promote global collaboration on COVID-19 pandemic if political circumstances allows. So for example, this year, there was the G20 health ministers meeting, but there were no communique because of the conflict between China and US, and also US and WHO something. But also, and G20 has been playing a key role. For example, G20 chair, Saudi Arabia joined the co-host of the pledging conference of the ACT Accelerator on May 4. And also G20 countries are key donors for the international COVID-19 financing. Please see the table in the right side, and you can see more emerging donor countries has been putting more money for the ACT Accelerator than the Global Fund 6 reflection meeting. So that we need to get this opportunity to get more money from the emerging donor countries for the Global Fund. And also we can achieve it because we can achieve it if we can raise the awareness of these countries on the importance of the role of the Global Fund on COVID-19, especially in the ACT Accelerator, and they are playing on the kind of key role on the diagnostics and also health system strengthening, and also preventing the possible setback of the gains of recent 2 decades to fight ATM. And it is also the key role of the Global Fund, so that it is a key to raise awareness of these traditional and emerging donors of G20, the importance of the Global Fund and for the to fight COVID-19 pandemic. It is key for the further advocacy from civil society using G20. So thank you very much, and Rachel will provide more details on the this year G20 C20. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Masabi. It was very, very interesting to see now how it's changing the landscape, international landscape, from the GFAN, the Global Fund of Replenishment, to the Accelerator pledge, which we are seeing that there is a new landscape with the emerging economies, emerging countries belonging to the G20 that are increasing their pledge, their contribution. And it's true what you say, that COVID-19 may really develop now a new map for international solidarity. It's very, very interesting. So I will give now the opportunity to talk to Rachel. It will be very interesting to hear from Rachel, which is working for Result UK. And Rachel will talk about what is the C20, what is the role of the civil society in the G20, the Saudi Arabia Summit. Rachel is a senior policy advisor officer for Result UK. She focuses on tuberculosis. And she's also the co-chair of the C20 Global Health Working Group, and she previously worked for Medicines Sans Frontières Access Campaign and for the Gavi Vaccine Alliance. It will be very interesting, Rachel, if possible, if you can give also us which will be the role of the Chinese civil society in this process of the C20 and G20, because we saw from Masaki that is very interesting that China, from the commitment that made to the Global Fund, it was just few million, 18 million, if I'm not wrong, of dollars, passing to almost 47 million of dollars for the ACT Accelerator. So it's more than 3 times what they did. And this is a real example on how the landscape is changing. So Rachel, thanks for sharing your ideas, and the floor is yours now.
Hi, thank you. Tara, do you want me to share my screen, or you'll share the slides?
If you can share it, that would be easier. But if not, I can do it if you run into any troubles.
Oh, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Apparently I'm sharing the slides. Hold on one second.
So
sorry.
hi. Oh.
Sorry, is it G20 Italy? G20 Italy, is that the slides you're sharing, or Rachel,
No, it's called
sorry.
G20 AIDS 2020 presentation.
Apologies. Go ahead and the slides will pop up eventually.
Thank you. So hi everyone, thanks for the introduction. My name is Rachel Hoare, and this year I've been working as the international co-chair of the C20 Global Health Working Group. So as Masaki mentioned, C20 is an official engagement group of the G20 for civil society engagement with the process. Others include Think Tank 20, Youth 20, Business 20, Labour 20, and so on. And then within the C20, there are specific working groups to mirror the G20 agenda, including this one on health. So next slide, please. Each year, it's the president of the G20 that gets to set the health agenda. And this year, under the Saudi presidency, the 5 priorities were value-based healthcare, which was a new one, digital health, patient safety, pandemic preparedness, and antimicrobial resistance. So often these issues will continue from previous years, as for example, antimicrobial resistance has been on the agenda for the last few years. And then other, what they call legacy issues, which this year for the Saudis was particularly value-based healthcare. Previous years, that would be aging for Japan and obesity for Argentina. Next slide, please. So in response to what the Saudis laid out, the C20 Global Health Working Group identified various priorities based on that agenda. Firstly, one was understanding what they really meant by value-based healthcare and whether that actually sort of goes against the previous year's priorities of universal health coverage, because it seemed to mean sort of good quality healthcare for those who can afford it. Which, yeah, is not something we really wanted to champion. Secondly, we talked about how the C20 can play a role in holding the G20 Health Working Group to account for the commitments made in previous years. For example, on TB, which has been in the communiques and declarations since 2017, but we've seen not a lot of action as a result of those mentions. And then finally, how to ensure that human rights are at the center of all discussions, because at the beginning of this presidency, being in Saudi Arabia, there were a lot of concerns that human rights elements might be missed out, or that the civil society space wouldn't be as sort of open and independent as it's meant to be. But of course, when COVID-19 pandemic hit, all the priorities had to shift a bit anyway to be a bit more reactive, and we had a look at sort of the precedent that of G20 countries showing leadership in response to a health emergency. And in 2014, we found that the G20 did respond to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa with their first collective commitment on global health, and they in fact highlighted their comparative advantage in addressing longer-term systemic issues and gaps in capability, preparedness, and response capacity that expose the global economy to the impacts of infectious disease. And they had announced a range of measures to strengthen national, regional, and global preparedness against threats posed by infectious disease, and mobilized resources for the prevention and control of Ebola back in 2014, which proved effective. So next slide, please. So a few ways that the C20 works to try and engage the president country and influence the agenda. First of all, in January, the co-chairs, so that's me and the Saudi co-chair, met. We had an intervention in the first G20 Global Health Working Group meeting to express our sort of concerns with what the stated priorities would be, especially around value-based healthcare, and sort of reminding G20 countries of what they've committed to previously. So one of those things was on TB, which, since the high-level meeting on TB happened, the G20 countries have sort of reiterated their commitment to achieving them, but without much follow-up action. And so that was just sort of reminded G20 countries that over half of all new TB infections are in G20 countries, about 700,000 TB deaths a year, and also highlighting the economic impact of the disease, given that the G20's sort of original focus on economic issues. So as we've sort of shifted to looking at the secondary impacts, so including on TB, HIV and malaria of COVID-19, modeling studies and experiences that the Global Fund, for example, is having in high burden countries have been very useful for sharing with the host country. A few other things that the C20 has done this year, we'd planned to meet with the Saudi government officials in person in March. Obviously, this was turned into a virtual meeting, which in fact did allow a lot more people, a lot more civil society advocates from around the world to participate. The meeting fell also on World TB Day, so we spoke a lot about COVID-19, but also the secondary impacts on TB, HIV and malaria, as well as the role of the Global Fund in responding. We've had various sorts of written communications as well, recommendations ahead of the health ministers meeting, which unfortunately has yet to produce a declaration, and follow-up calls with the Saudi government officials in charge of those health ministers meeting negotiations. So next slide, please. I just want to talk a bit about where I think also GFAN advocates in particular now are very well placed for a sort of final advocacy push around the G20 this year. The first thing is a joint meeting of the health and finance ministers, which is happening in September. This kind of joint meeting only happened for the first time last year under Japanese presidency, but people in the end were quite disappointed with how it turned out, more just like a dinner basically with no outcome. So let's see. But so yeah, and the Saudis did say they wouldn't be continuing having this joint meeting, but it is particularly in response to COVID-19, and it will focus more on longer term solutions for pandemic preparedness beyond COVID-19 as well. I think this is a good opportunity to be pushing for G20 commitments to the Global Fund's COVID-19 response mechanism. So any advocacy ahead of that with ministries of health, or in fact Sherpa teams in countries. Secondly, there's the Leaders Summit, which is happening in November, and in previous years, health has made it into the Leaders Declaration, and I assume with COVID-19 it will too this year. So again, that's engagement with Sherpa teams in countries. It's G20 countries plus quite a lot of others that are involved in various different capacities too, and you can find a full list on the website, or I can share. So yeah, that's just a couple of things to get involved with, either through direct involvement with the government departments in charge, or through MP engagement to apply parliamentary pressure on the government for specific action at these G20 meetings. The Global TB Caucus runs a specific campaign on engaging with the G20. So yes, and just on the final slide, please, I've put my email here, so if you were interested in getting involved in any of that kind of G20 campaigning or advocacy in the lead up to those meetings coming up, then do feel free to reach out. And we have a lot of sort of recommendation documents, briefing documents, template emails, that kind of thing for outreach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. You said that in September we'll have the Health and Finance Minister meeting, and then in November the summit. Just to remind to the participant that in October at the same time we will have the C20 Summit. If there is anything from the participant that you want to say, recommendation, you can share with Rachel, especially. She's the spokesperson for health, and then with Stefania and Masaki. But it's very, very important to appoint the email of Rachel, because if there is anything that you want to tell to the C20, this is the place, and you can address Rachel.
Yeah, sorry, just to say on the C20 Summit, so that's something that happens every year as part of the C20 process, and it's kind of an official handover to the host country of the policy pack that the C20 puts together. And they normally have a lot of sort of side events and sessions happening that they would invite government representatives to. This year, obviously, it's all happening virtually, so it could be an opportunity again for GFAN advocates as GFAN or individually to organize a session on the side too. Thanks.
Thanks. The next speakers will be, I think she's already online, Abina Hair from the Alliance India. Abina, I'm not sure she's online. Are you there, Abina? Somebody from the organization can tell me if she's online, or I may pass to the next speakers.
Marco, I don't see her, so maybe we can go on because we have
Okay.
25 minutes
Okay.
more.
Okay. So just to pass on the next speaker, if Abina will join us, please tell me, and then I will introduce her after Stefania. Stefania Burbo, she is part of the Global Health Italian Network. She's the spokesperson, and she will tell us about an overview of the G20, especially the G20 that will take place in Italy in 2021, priorities and plan for the civil society. Stefania works as a focal point and advocacy officer for the Global Health Italian Network, which is one of the biggest coalition in Italy of civil society organizations working on health and promoting the rights to health worldwide. The network is at the same time a member of the GFAN. She is the spokesperson at the same time of GCAP Italy, which is the global call to action against poverty. And at the same time, Stefania is currently member of the C20 steering committees and Global Health Working Group. G20 next year, in 2020, GCAP Italy will have the lead in the conduction of the C20 when Italy will be the hosting the G20. So it will be very, very important to hear from Stefania about the process that we are starting now for the next year, 2021, when Italy will be the leader of the G20. So Stefania, you can go and you can talk to us about priorities and perspective from the civil society about global health, gender equality, and especially sexual and health rights. Thank you very much, Stefania.
Thank you, Marco. Can you hear my screen?
Yes, okay.
Okay, so just a few words about the next G20 agenda. Italy has not yet presented it, but informally they told us that it should be developed on the following 3P, people, planet, prosperity. And that they wanted to use a holistic approach, highlighting interconnections among the 3P. So, for example, highlighting the relation between people and the planet. Each P includes several topics. For example, inclusion, and that means the fight against inequalities, focus on women, youth, vulnerable groups. Other topics are energy transformation, sustainable development, innovation and knowledge, food system, education, better recovery. With regard with global health, since the outbreak of COVID-19, global health has regained a leading role in the global political agenda, and so it will be a priority in the next G20 agenda, probably with a focus on health systems strengthening. And it will be included in each of the 3P I just mentioned, because they want to use the One Health approach. I reported also research and development, because considering that vaccine and therapeutics for COVID-19 could be, I would say, hopefully available during the Italian G20 presidency. Italy is very keen on research and development, not just for COVID-19, but in general. The civil society role. As Rachel and Masaki has already well explained, it is the C20 that is having officially the relationship with the G20 institutions. And in Italy, it is GCAP, Global Call to Action Against Poverty, that will have the lead of the C20 next year. GCAP Italy has already started creating in Italy a civil society platform, and it is a key interlocutor for the Italian institution with regard to G7 and the G20, and we have been in contact with the G20 Sherpa office since last year with regard to the next G20. As a as Italian civil society, we think, as I think most of civil society organizations worldwide, that we think that the COVID-19 crisis found a very fertile ground as our development challenges did not start and will not end with the pandemic. And this is the first message that we would like to submit to the Italian institution. With regard to global health, of course, for us, it is really important a financial support for a strong multilateral UN-centered framework, and also increasing health investment in building stronger health systems and in affordable and accessible by all research and development. But we are really looking forward to building the civil society recommendations together with the global civil society. Rachel, Masaki, Maria Grazia and I are working on the G20 process. We are in the Civil 20 framework, and we will be next year in the Civil 20 framework, and we ask for your support, because really we need your support in order to push for a strong global health agenda next year. Thank you very much.
Grazie Stefania, thank you very much Stefania. I'm going straight to the next speaker, which is Maria Grazia Panunzi from AIDS. AIDS is the Italian Association for Women in Development. Is a member of the AIDS is member of the board of the Italian Network on Global Health. Is part of the coordination team of the Italian Coalition Against Poverty, GCAP. Is involved in several processes on women's rights, like the CSW, CEDAW, CPD, HRC. And Maria Grazia Panunzi holds a degree in political science, but she also has, with AIDS, a very, very long experience in several countries, in Middle East, in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, and in Russia. So Maria Grazia, I think you want to finalize what was started by Stefania, so you can go on, and then maybe we can ask to you and Stefania both the same question. We can appoint the same topics. Thank you very much, Maria Grazia.
Thank you to everybody, and good morning. Thanks a lot for being here with us. And I just want to take I just want to come back to what Stefania said about the opportunity of COVID-19, because we know that as any pandemics, COVID-19 is impacting disproportionately women and men and girls because of their sex. We know that at economic level, women earn less of the insecure jobs and live close to poverty. The health of women generally is adversely impacted through the reallocation of resources and priority, including sexual reproductive health services. And in this period, unpaid care work has increased due to the restricted movement and the social isolation measure. Gender-based violence is increasing exponentially. COVID-19 is not only a challenge for the policy and for the future, it's not a challenge for global health system. This is a test for the organization of our society and our future. Recovery must lead to a more equal world that is more resilient into future crises. The fiscal stimulus packages and emergency measures to address the public health gaps have been put in place in many countries to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. But if we want to make a change now, the national response have the opportunity to place women and girls. It means their inclusion, representation, rights, social and economic outcomes, equality and protection at the center of their policies and programs, and place women's leadership and contribution at the heart of the COVID-19 response, resilience, and the recovery efforts. This is not just about rectifying long-standing inequalities, but also about building a more just and resilient world for everybody, where no one is left behind. Policy response have to recognize that women can be the backbone of recovery in the community, and only in this case, policy response will be the more impactful for it. This was also the message came out from the Women's Leaders Virtual Roundtable on COVID-19 and the Future that was held in the 20th of April of this year during the G20, and that gathered together UN agency, OECD, representative of G20 countries, and the CSO. With reference to the gender equality, there is at the general level a consensus on the importance to reach gender equality. Also, Saudi G20 presidency affirms to be strongly committed to keeping up the momentum built under previous G20 presidencies and to make concrete progress to empower women and girls in line with the Sustainable Development Goal number 5. And they have the will to address women empowerment in a holistic manner. And this is, they want to continue to promote gender equality, including supporting initiatives such as empowerment and progression of women economic representation. But even if it's very important, this initiative, it's refer only to the economic sphere of women's life, and they do not have financial resources. So it will be important to have financial resources allocated in order to support any financial plan to support the initiative. If we want to reach the gender equality, it's fundamental that also the G20 will consider that in any policy referred to universal health coverage, it must include also universal access to sexual reproductive health and rights services, in order to empower women and girls, and holistic services that include also gender-based violence and harmful practices will contribute to reach the aim. The aim do not leave nobody behind. And also it will be important to consider youth and adolescents, specifically girls, the largest population group on the planet, by promoting comprehensive and age-responsive information, education, and adolescent-friendly, comprehensive, quality, and timely sexual reproductive health services. This will be also our recommendation for the future G20 that will be held in Italy. Also, Italy, they also, in informal level, they informed about the importance that they want to give to the gender equality and the elimination of any form of discrimination and gender-based violence. And we hope that this attention that will be provided to this issue at formal level will be supported for concrete initiative and specific resources allocated for it. So we recommend that Italy will pursue all the initiatives taken by the previous G20 and will carry out also with the recommendation that have been done by the Women's Leader Virtual Roundtable on COVID-19 and the future, that take into consideration the health system and the care work, the economic impact on women, the gender-based violence, women, peace and security in the humanitarian aid. These are all the key areas identified. Then there are also the recommendation. I can provide you this information if you want, but I don't want to take any more time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Maria Grazia. Just to take one of the sentences that you said that COVID is also a test for our society, and I would add also will be a test for multilateral organizations. We know how much some of them they have been under attack, like WHO, and it could be a good test also for the Global Fund. I'm taking this opportunity to start to introduce Françoise Vanny from the Global Fund. She is in the Global Fund the head of external relations, and she has more than 20 years of experience in resource mobilization and advocacy in several organizations. She has been part of United Nations Relief and Work Agency in the Middle East. She served as a country representative in Angola and Cuba for Médecins du Monde. She has been part of a France organization that has been transformed by Françoise into Oxfam France. And now she's going to tell to us the perspective of multilateral organization on global health and G20, of course. And of course, she will talk about the Global Fund. Just to add something on and taking the link with what the previous speakers they said, it will be very, very important also if you can tell us, Françoise, a little bit about the role that the new donors they may have, and especially emerging economies they may have in the Global Fund and in putting money to the ACT Accelerator, for instance. And it will be very, very important also to know if you have already some relationship or some discussion with China, and it would be very interesting. Thank you very much. Is your time, Françoise? Are you online?
Yes, I am. Thank you very, very much, Marco. And indeed, thank you for the invitation, and huge thank you to all the panelists who I know have been all strongly engaged in the current C20, G20 processes. Also, thank you to the wider GFAN community for the tremendous support to the Global Fund, including, by the way, the very excellent C20 policy pack that was just published in June and that was presented earlier by Rachel. So as it was referred to by colleagues, the Global Fund advocates engagement has really blossomed in 2018, 2019 in the context of the G20 under Argentinian and Japanese hosting, which was extremely helpful. We've seen that continue this year, although it's been a bit challenging, as Masaki has alluded to, because of political sort of circumstances. And I'm certainly very, very glad and excited to hear about the plans for the upcoming Italian presidency. It's a shame that Abina could not join us, because I know that the Indian advocates are also ramping up their plans and efforts, and have now joined the working group in advance of the Indian hosting. So a huge thank you to all of you, and this is really, really important. It's really important because we have managed to put global health on the agenda at the G20 over the past few years, and obviously the COVID-19 pandemic reinforces the need for global leadership and global investment in global health. So it's more important than ever. So I've got a lot of things to say, but I'm also very conscious of time. So let me try and focus on a few elements that I wanted to bring to this conversation. The first thing, just to have in mind the sort of scale of the impact or the potential impact that COVID-19 might have on global health, but more particularly on the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria. And in a way to be extremely aware of what is at stake. And the stakes are very, very high at the moment. COVID-19 basically threatens the progress in the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria in a very significant and very real way. So if we look at the different modeling studies that our partners at WHO, UNAIDS, Stop TB have been developing, we can see that in 2020 alone, we could face more than 1.4 million additional people who could die from HIV, TB, and malaria as a knock-on or indirect consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. What that tells us is that the indirect impact of COVID could be more significant than the direct impact. And this is extremely significant because, first of all, that means that what is at stake is actually more than a decade of investment in progress and hard-won gains in the fight against those three diseases. So that's extremely sort of serious. But also what it tells us is that we need an holistic response. It's not enough to be saying, okay, let's deal with COVID-19 now and we'll go back to HIV, TB, and malaria in the future. If we do not look at it holistically, we will lose lives unnecessarily across the board. So we really need a comprehensive response that would take into account both the direct and indirect impact of COVID-19. Otherwise, we will simply fail. So that's one message. The second one is that because of what is at stake and which is extremely high, we need more leadership and we need more commitment and we need more resources. And this is why the G20 continuing engagement on global health is so important. So we've seen, fortunately, political and financial mobilization of the key actors in response to COVID-19 over the past few months, but the response is wholly inadequate still at this stage in terms of the volume of the response in a way, but also in terms of its content. So in terms of the volume, we've seen more money going into economic recovery packages in the wealthiest countries than we've seen investment in supporting the least developed or the most vulnerable countries and communities in the world. So there is an issue about how much is invested, but there is also an issue of equity in terms of the COVID-19 response so far. So there is a lot to be done to help shape the global health response, policy conversation and funding conversation that is happening right now. There is also a need to, and this is where the activist community is so critical, we must ensure that the global COVID-19 response protects human rights and reduces stigma and discrimination, right? And it's been mentioned by previous speakers, women, but also key and vulnerable populations. We know that from the experience in the fight against HIV. We've also learned that from the more recent Ebola outbreaks in Africa. We need to make sure that we support community engagement, community-led responses, because it's critical to make sure that the response is fit for purpose and effective. And we need to ensure that COVID-19 responses in different countries is not used as a way to undermine human rights, but rather that human rights are at the center of such responses. So there is so much at stake and so much to be done to address COVID-19, but also to sort of protect the hard-won gains in the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria. And we need more leadership globally and more coordination than what we have today. So a few pointers on this. So in terms of what the Global Fund has been doing in that space as the very large and the first funding mechanism in terms of grants for health systems and the organization that has been created to fight infectious diseases overall. And that brings to the table, I guess, quite successful partnership model. We've been stepping up quite quickly, putting on the table up to $1 billion to help countries adapt their HIV, TB, and malaria programs, protect health workers, and respond to COVID-19 in their particular circumstances. What we've in the interest of time, I won't go into the details, but in essence, what I wanted to say is that we have already deployed a little bit more than 400 million of that amount, and we think that by the end of this month, we would have deployed pretty much everything. And this is why we have published last week, or a few days ago, a report around how to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 or AIDS, TB, and malaria, and making sure that the least and low and middle income countries are supported enough to address this challenge. And we've calculated that the Global Fund would need $5 additional billion to be able to play its role in supporting countries and as part of its contribution to the global response to COVID-19. So I refer you to our report recently published and obviously on our website. Marco, you wanted me to talk a little bit about ACTA and the G20, the relationship with some of the emerging economies in the G20.
I think we have just a few minutes, so I will take the opportunity to take what you said about the $5 additional billion. And there is a question that is more or less related to this, about the position of the US in the G20, in the discussion, and what do you expect from the US, not only for the Global Fund, but as a commitment towards the $5 billion that you are telling, and about the environment in general. Is a Cinzia from, a question from Cinzia.
Yes, sure. So at the moment, we first of all, we did get a first commitment, a very significant commitment from Germany at the EC Global Citizen event last week, with 180 million euros committed to that response. We, through our friends in the US, are engaging with the Congress and other stakeholders in the US to explore the possibility for the US to provide additional funding as well. As you know, the funding comes from Congress. And last weekend, we got sort of positive signals, I would say, coming out from the House with an initial bill mentioning additional support to the Global Fund in the context of the COVID-19 response. All of that is very preliminary, and there is a follow-up process coming up. So it's too soon to say, but there is certainly there a conversation happening for additional support for the Global Fund in the context of this response. We do have conversations, very lively conversations with some of the emerging economies in the G20, in both directions as donors. And you've seen, for example, the Gulf countries, including KSA, pledging at the 6th Replenishment Conference and engaging in the COVID-19 response. But we are also providing support in the COVID-19 context to some of those economies, including some of those countries, I should say, including India and South Africa. So it's this sort of dual role where some of the new BRICS, let's say, are receiving additional support from the Global Fund to help their response to COVID-19, and at the same time, some of them are actually contributing to the Global Fund. So this is very interesting, and we are actually briefing the BRICS Health Attaché tomorrow here in Geneva to strengthen the dialogue with those countries.
Thank you very much, Francesca. It's helpful to know that the civil society, you mentioned friends in the US that are talking now with the Congress in order to understand which will be the position from the US. And it's very, very important, as Cart is writing here, that activists and organizations working on HIV, TB, and malaria, they have a fundamental role now, because it's really now the moment to push and to make our voice strong and united, and towards not only a full replenishment of the new, let's say, additional billions for the Global Fund, but also in general to prepare for a second wave of COVID, if we will have another one or another emergency, because the COVID just simply showed to us that we were not prepared, and something that has happened to us a few months ago may happen again next year, after 2 years, 5 years. So it's really, now we are really aware that civil society have an important role really to push and to press the government of richest and emerging economies that there is something to do from now onwards up to really fighting all the disease, not only in Europe, but all over the world. I think we are running out of time.
Yes, sorry, I have to cut you off. Thank you so much, but I really do have to set up the next call. And so they're waiting to log in and they can't log in until I shut this call down. So my apologies, but I want to thank everyone for joining the call today. And I will make sure that it's available online as soon as the other call is done. I'll get it set up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.